Before I have a couple questions, but does anybody else have anything right off the bat they want to address to any of the team? Okay, so my question, and we're going to get both sides of the answer, I think, here, but we talked about customer experience, and Paul, in your category, you talked about, my question is, how do you wrap that desired customer experience into an agreement with your suppliers so that they're on the same path as you, is that you're trying to strive customer experience, you need them to support you. So from both of you, I was thinking, how do you wrap that in agreement knowing that you don't have real definitive measures yet on customer experience? Who wants to go first? Okay.
Okay, great. So how to wrap it into the vendor?
Yeah, so you get a vendor agreement. How do you tie customer experience into that?
We haven't yet. Okay, so it's more of a continuation of the agreement. So if you're not having a good experience, you be very, very specific and very clear with them as to why you're not having a very good experience, what the expectations are, and it's really, from my perspective, all about laying out expectations. Lay out those expectations, and if they're not meeting those expectations when it comes for renewal, as I said earlier, we actually changed out one entire platform because they were not meeting the expectation. We're probably going to be removing another platform based upon those expectations. But it's really making sure the vendor understands what you're looking for, what you want, and if you give some examples of what that is, then if they're not delivering, then you just look for a different partner who will deliver that aspect of it. But we haven't come up with a way yet to formalize that into a document, other than the KPIs and the service level agreements and so forth. But from a customer experience itself, it's more of a what are you doing above and beyond the contractual items.
So I kind of took your question a completely different direction, but I'll answer it your way too, because I think that's appropriate. So for like my relationship with my support vendors, how do I get my point across with them? I think that, you know, it's really the same way you would do it with a client. In my opinion, you sit down with them and you talk with them, and much like my clients require me to have monthly business reviews or quarterly business reviews, I require my vendor partners to do the same thing. My envelope vendor sits down with me once a quarter, and we talk about quality and what they can do to improve the product for me, also my client, if I'm listening to them, and forms vendors, or the vendor partners for the equipment, or whatever the case may be. So we're having ongoing discussions with them as well. Yes, there's customer scorecards, and we can we work through that a little bit. Our procurement team provides some of that information, but at the end of the day, and I found it really interesting. We were talking about, your conversation specifically was talking about relationship. Get in there, have the relationship. I could not agree more. But here's the problem. You deal that, you get all this wonderful relationship going, and then an RFP happens and procurement gets involved. And all the people who you've built the relationship with for the last 10 years are not even asked their opinion in many cases. And it becomes this really very frustrating thing, because they're frustrated because they're actually happy with your service, hopefully. You're performing well for them. And it really then becomes this commodities numbers game. And they're not considering all those pieces of the puzzle that you bring to the table that are the value add, that top of your pyramid. And so that's where it becomes very, very frustrating. So now let me answer it the other way that I was thinking about. I thought at first, I thought your question was, how do you get your vendor partners to be a part of our customers' experience? And so some of the things that we have done there is we've actually invited our envelope vendors to a QBR. We've invited our form vendors to a QBR. We've invited our software vendors to a QBR because we had a client that had a specific need, and we wanted to pick their brain and have them. Now, they're going as a representative in that case of Broadridge, right? Because we have the relationship, but they get that. They understand that. They're helping us to potentially win a piece of business or keep a piece of business. Or, more importantly, we're helping solution a problem for one of our customers. You talked about that hook. That's how you keep that customer coming back. Whenever you're being innovative and you're starting to think outside the box, that's when you start to really get that customer highly engaged. We did something very, very simple. I'll give you a classic example. Did something very, very simple with our envelope vendor. We brought 20 representatives from the floor, 20 operators, brought them in the room. The envelope vendor sitting at this table, and they're saying, what's wrong with our envelopes? Now, this is a vendor who is very good. We have almost no problems. What's the problems today? We found out that with a very simple change, they put the lips of the boxes on the outside instead of on the inside. Okay? So by putting the lips of the boxes, in other words, where the seal points are, on the outside of the boxes instead of on the inside of the boxes, I no longer, as an operator, have to throw away the first 20 and the last 20 envelopes because they're bent. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but whenever your customers are paying for those envelopes, not you, it's a pass-through to the customer. When they're paying for those envelopes, that can yield a lot of savings on 4 million envelopes for one customer in 1 month. So that's how, those types of things are how I think you can drive that vendor to help your end customer have a better client experience. So I'll be quiet now, sorry.
No, I'd agree to that as well. And the thought occurred to me that if you've asked your customer, what do we have to do to exceed your expectations, then you can go to your vendors and go, what can you do to help me achieve that? And share that that goal with them, so that they're part of that team as well. And if they can't perform after a certain amount of time, as you said, then it may be time to look around and make a change. But I think that'd be a good strategy.
So coming from a service provider, wouldn't it be ideal that when it's time to recompete for the contract that you're evaluated on how well you performed from a customer experience standpoint versus everything coming back to price and SLA? If you could measure the customer experience at RFP time, because how many times for service providers, the incumbent typically loses because they're all is forgotten about all the great things they did, but what's remembered is the one bad statement that went to the CEO of one particular company, and then it all comes right crashing back down. And being able to evaluate it on how you improve customer experience. Now, the key is this is going to be a very difficult thing to measure and quantify, so everybody's going to be reluctant to put it into agreement, because how do you really evaluate it? And it ends up becoming a he said, she said it at contract time. But no, I appreciate your comments on that. That was good. Any other comments or questions?
I would like that just to be. So my vote would be, it doesn't have to be the solution. I'd just like for it to be a part. What I'm finding in RFPs is that it is truly coming down to what's your quality rating, what's your price per image, what's your price to insert, what's your postal discount, average postal discount rate, what's your average SLA attainment, what's your quality rating, and it's all metric, which is great, but it does absolutely commoditize the business. So I would even be okay with, okay, do all those things, that's fair, that's absolutely fair, but put a quotient in there somewhere that talks to client satisfaction, and customer experience, right? At least have that as a factor, because what I feel like I see a lot of times is that it's just completely annihilated and out of the question, because that's where we have, from a procurement standpoint, I think that's where we've oversensitized the issue and said, oh, well, we've got to take relationship out of it because they may have taken them to dinner last night, and that could sway their thought pattern. Now, I don't want that as much as what has been your experience with our company. That should have some play in it. Now, in all fairness, if you've been with our company since 1996, you don't know what the experience is with another company. And that's fair. I get that. So you would have to have some type of an industry standard or some tool that would be very interesting to build, to have as part of, at least to be considered, a scorecard to be considered. Right.
Because if you know that this is the way they do it, and geez, I lost money or my profit level was low, therefore let's go around, I'd like my price to be X plus. And the new guy doesn't know that yet and beats you, but that experience is that for another 2 or 3 years go around, or however long like the contract is. Everyone's new.
I think experience can be positive and negative for you. So you're right. It is a two-edged sword. So the negative is you just screwed up. It seems like you always screw up right before an RFP. Right? And the other thing is you always screw up right before a quarterly business review. Whenever you're on the plane,
The day
you
before,
get the
yeah.
call that, hey, guess what? Right? So it can be a negative. On the other hand, and and I was going to mention this at some point this morning when we were talking about relationship. When we asked our customers about how do we exceed your expectations, one of the ways that they came back, I've pulled the phrase, and I'm sure I got it from somewhere else. We constantly look for Superman moments, right? Because as much as that bad moment is remembered, that Superman moment's remembered as well, right? When the customer sends you their data 2 days late, they still have a 5-day SLA. They realize that contractually they don't have a leg to stand on because the way you built your contract made sense, all right? But they're saying, I need your help. And you pull that rabbit out of a hat, get it done for them. You can't always do it, but you do this time. That was a Superman moment. That will live for a period of time, not long, but for a period of time. It has a shelf life. Yeah, it does have a shelf life. But we constantly look for those Superman moments. And you have to be smart about those because sometimes you try to bite off a Superman moment and it kills you in the end because you fail. But that experience can be both sides, I agree.
Anything from the audience?
So we've talked a little bit about CCM, and we've talked about the fact that postage is a large component of what it costs to do a mailing. A customer comes to you and says, "I want to cut my postage spend by 10%." Do you think that's first of all, what would your recommendations be in order to achieve that? And second, what do you think you should be asking that customer with respect to questions about what their CCM strategy is? Or are they just coming to you with a number that, somebody said, well, that would be great if I get to that number kind of thing? So, does that make sense?
Well, you probably know how I'd answer that is look for mail that you don't need to mail. Okay, it's a lot harder to find that 10% in deeper postage discounts or commingling, which adds to your expenses, rather than looking at what it is you're mailing and deciding can I save 100% on these pieces that I don't have to mail anymore. So depending on the application, can you reduce those expenses either by converting some of those people to a paperless delivery? Can you change from detailed billing to a summary bill with the details available online? Can you pair your targeting better on a promotional piece to do that? Can you offset that 10% by adding some promotional messages that increase revenue? Maybe you can talk the client into that kind of thing. So I think those are the approaches that I would take rather than going for a strict postage play and saying, let's see if we can get better discounts from the Postal Service.
Yeah, good luck with trying to get better postage rates off the Postal Service. They tend not to come to the table very often. I guess the way we'd approach it is to get them to understand they're probably asking the wrong question, because someone somewhere along the line said, you're over budget, or we have to cut out 10% flat across the board, without any consideration to it's easy to cut 10% out, just stop doing the mailings. But what are you doing? What are you really trying to achieve? And do you understand what the ramifications are if we decrease the document size, if we decrease the font, if we decrease the paper weight? There's a lot of different ways you can achieve it, but I'd want to go back and find out what they're ultimately trying to do. And more often than not, unfortunately, it's just, I've been told I have to cut 10% out of my budget. And postage is my biggest expense, so therefore I need 10% reduction. And they end up making cuts which have more downstream negative effects, because their communications, they just stopped doing communications. And trying to go back and ask them, what are you really trying to achieve here?
What if I clarify and say, I want to increase my digital distribution by 10%? And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to cut my postage spend but I'm really trying to get a 10% increase in the digital adoption. To change your answer.
It depends on what you're trying to do with, we all of us get 1,000 emails, correct? Especially from retailers. And just because they're getting that email doesn't mean, or whatever the distribution channel is, doesn't mean it's actually connecting with the client. And I go back to the original question, learning how to ask the right questions to understand really what they're trying to do. If they're just trying to change the channel, then you can change the channel, but it doesn't mean you're going to get better results or you're going to see a better show just by changing the channel. And I think I'd want to go back and really try to understand exactly what they're attempting to do. Are they trying to get more adoption? We've had worked with a client who said that they were working with a vendor, and they said they're going to guarantee them 30% adoption rate on email. And we said, yeah, go for it. It's just, in our field, in our industry, I haven't seen, at least with our company, anything approaching anywhere near even half of that. It's pitiful right now. So you really have to, people want to, they go to conferences and they hear, we have to go digital, we have to do this, we have to do that. And I don't think they really understand what they're even asking oftentimes.
So, before you answer, so if I say, well, Cameron, I love your solution, I love I love everything about it, and gosh, in order to pay for your solution or get you to win this deal, you got to give me 10% more digital.
So,
What do you say to that person?
so first of all, I would assume that we're in the middle of an RFP, so I have a lot of data at my fingertips. Okay, so let's say that up front, because I'd have to understand where you are today, what your breadth of your business is, what type of business you're in, because if you're in the financial services business versus the utility business, it's a different dynamic, and I know what my runway looks like. Listen, we have crafted, Broadridge has crafted RFP responses in the last 5 years that have digital guarantees in them. Okay? Now, we're not going to get out over our skis. Okay? We understand that there is only so much runway that you can do. And by the way, we also don't do a digital guarantee without the client having skin in the game. In other words, if you don't do what you're saying you're going to do, then I'm not held accountable to my digital guarantee. Okay, so in some cases there's activities that the client has to participate in order to ensure that e-adoption occurs, right? So it can't be, I'm going to be put on my cape and come in and save your 10%. I completely agree with you. You got to ask the right question. So I would have asked probably 15 questions based on your one question alone, which is save me 10%, right? Because you have to understand, is this truly a CFO saying, hey, cut postage by 10% because they see that as the top line item? Probably is. Because what's happened, and those of us who have the white hairs can say that, it used to be 50% postage, 50% fee, okay? My clients today in the financial services industry, it's 70% postage, 30% fee. So absolutely they're looking at the postage as being the number one cost. So cut postage, great thought. Now, how do you want to go about it? You got to ask a bunch of questions. You've got to find out, is it just about getting postage down? Is it about increasing e-adoption or digital adoption? What's the end desired state? If it's a CFO saving 10%, then let's talk about how we can save you 10% on your dollars. Don't attach it necessarily to postage, because there could be 100 other things that we can do. We can design your envelope differently. We can look at form weight. You mentioned that. Coverage of color on your form. There's a lot we can do to save you 10%, potentially. But pulling it out of postage, a regulated area, is very hard. It can be done, depending upon what your saturation already is. But it's probably, it would be a lot easier if a client told me, I need 10%, than it would be to say, take 10% out of my postage. I'll work with you to find the 10%. By the way, we've had that like crazy in the last 10 years, as I'm sure everybody has. They come back, our clients have come back and they've said, I need to reduce my spend by $1 million with you over the next year. Can you work with me to do that? And we'll sit down and we'll create a team and we'll start looking at their product. By the way, part of that team could be the envelope design vendor, the form vendor. It could be in a lot of different things. So I agree that right out of the gate, you got to ask the right question. I mean, because as soon as you asked that, my brain went through 15 questions that I wanted to ask you, right? So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, the one commentary on this, how many times do they come and say, I want you to save $1 million and don't make me change a thing?
Yeah, almost all.
Yeah, okay. Okay, hang on.
So as you know, postage rates are going to stay the same for 2-ounce and 3-ounce mail as of January. Do you pass that savings completely over to your clients, or do you take a piece of that and make some profit on the postage changes?
In our business model, postage is just a pass through, so it's pass through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in our financial services space, it's the same way. So the other thing that we would look at is we would look at the way that you can. So a lot of our clients really won in the 2-ounce rides free scenario. I mean, that was a huge 6-figure savings for many of my clients. Okay. Now with the 3rd-ounce piece, it changes the dynamic yet again. And now we're starting to, you made the comment, well, that makes me go to a flat versus a fold. Now we're really starting to, no pun intended, push the envelope of what can go in a fold, because we can get it up to those 3 ounces. And we're usually already pushing, that limit with the client anyway to try to maximize their postage. But we're going to also try to see how we could get a client to that 3-ounce level as well. Yeah.
There's an expectation they're going to save big again, and it's not necessarily.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, we again, when we go to our quarterly business reviews, part of our responsibility as a vendor partner is to make sure you're up to date on the most recent postage regulations, right? So we've been going in our QBRs, we've been saying, hey, here's what's going on with postage, 3rd ounce, here's what's going on, so that they can prepare, because they're doing their fiscal planning too. And when we made the announcement about the 2nd-ounce rides free after we got it confirmed, I mean, those CFOs were over there going, holy cow, there's $600,000 I just got, so it's a big deal.
The challenge with that's going to be, though, as we all know, what the government giveth, it's going to take away. And the flip side of that is going to be, at some point, that might be rolled back. And that's an equally difficult conversation to have with clients.
So the answer of how they're doing it already, they're already there. The answer of how they're doing that already is that they have put all the software in place. If you don't already know this, I'm sure you do. They've already put all the software in place. They've already put a lot of the hardware in place. And so now you're getting your vendor scorecards back, and they'll be coming to you for penalties if you are not meeting all the regulations now. So before it was I'll call it a threat. Right. It was a threat, and it was, I think, a viable threat back then, but now there's teeth to it. And so we've got part of our service that we're providing to our customers now is that we give them those scorecards every month so that they can see, this month you were out of compliance. They didn't knock on our door, but they could. Let's get you back in compliance. Let's do a better job of NCOA update. Let's do a better job of ACS. Let's do a better job of whatever it may be in order to get you out of the radar so that there's no concern for you on the backside.
Questions? So, hold on, Skip has one.
Yes, this is related to expectations. Cameron, you made an interesting statement with regards to, you ask your customer straight out, how do I exceed your expectations? And then the discussion kind of flowed into how that becomes a moving target. How do you deal with that when you exceed the expectations? Are you already internally trying to figure out what the new expectations might be so you can kind of ramp up for that? Because it's got to be a moving target, just like customer communications is a moving target, so are customer expectations. And how do you convey that internally to your people?
So you do tend to have an idea of what exceeding an expectation will be for a customer, and it does, as I mentioned earlier, it does completely and It is very dynamic, depending upon what that customer is going through right now. I mean, I think everyone knows that the recent announcement of TD Ameritrade and Scottrade and what's going on with that world. Their definition of exceed expectations right now is going to be very different than a year from now. What they need me to do for them right now is very different than what they're going to need me to do from them a year from now. Now, do I have to ramp it up internally? Yeah, we have to take those things in consideration, but we have, up until the most recent acquisition, primarily serviced one sector. So it has been fairly consistent that what exceed meant for one customer was pretty close in many cases to what exceeded another customer in that sector. So we have to understand that. Now, the other part about that is that whenever you have some of the, what I would call Goliaths of the sector, they usually drive you to the absolute top of your capability, right? And so the beauty of it is if you can exceed their expectations, then you can roll that across the mid-tier and lower tier customers and really blow their socks off, which is one of the things that we try to do quite often. But yeah, you have to ramp up for it financially. You have to ramp up for it from a customer service standpoint. You talked about customer service being a differentiator. I absolutely believe it's a differentiator. And to give you an example, one of the things that's very hard to do internally is to convince senior leadership that your customer service representatives are probably some of the most important people you've got on the street, and talking with your customer because it is a single conduit of communication. I renamed our organization to client relations because I don't like the connotation of customer service. Customer service to me is that Russian guy who says, "This is Peggy." I don't want that, right? That's not the experience that our customers want. Our customers want to call someone 24/7, 365. We all wear cell phones. We all are available 24/7. They want to know that I can get to somebody and that I will get service and that service is customized to me. And so that said, I have to pay for that, meaning I need a higher skill set of my account executive. My account executive has the ability. You mentioned the $5 target. Who mentioned that? Was that you? You did. The $5 target thing. That is the type of accountability we have to have in our account executives. They can make $100,000 decisions without asking me as the general manager. Okay? Hey, I think that we shouldn't have charged them this, or we need a moment here. And they make that $100,000 decision. Now, will I ask them about it because I see it on the books? Sure, I have to. But they're making the right decision for the customer. If it's the right decision for the customer, it'll never be questioned. So you have to ramp up those expectations and then make sure it's funded by the people who support those expectations would be my answer.
And I would agree with what you have stated, and really looking at it from oftentimes it's your larger customers who are driving those expectations, and as you meet those and exceed those expectations, a lot of the second and third level tier customers benefit from that, because if you're going to roll it out here, you can roll it across the entire platform. And it's also, though, good to hear the voice of some of the smaller customers as well, because they come from a different perspective. And oftentimes they have different needs. And so we've also seen it work the reverse way, where we have a one-off customer, so wow, we never even considered something like that, and then roll it up, and it's worked out very, very well that way. And it goes back to the whole concept of accountability, as you were talking about, Cameron, where the people who are face-to-face with the clients every day, they have to be able to make decisions, and you have to have the trust in them that they're deciding what's best for the customer, not what's best for the production floor. And there's a tension there, because sometimes the production floor says, "You did what?"
Yeah, well, that dialogue, with the customers is the most important thing, to keep that dialogue going, as both of these organizations do, and I think the better organizations make sure that they handle that. So you always have that dialogue going back and forth. I don't think you have to worry too much about a continuing escalation to get to a point where you can't reach it, because things are always changing, and you're always looking for those kinds of opportunities to make improvements for your customers anyway. So I wouldn't see that as being a big issue.
I like the point actually Paul made, and you're absolutely spot on. It does work a lot that whenever you get the mega and you make them happy that you can roll it out. Agree completely. But I like your other point too, because we've had some of the smaller customers who are more nimble, more agile. Perhaps they're more of a startup type deal, so they've got a completely different mentality on how to go about this business. They come up with some of the most creative things that could really challenge you too. I mean, really force you into a whole different way of thinking about how you're doing this. So you do have you got to get it from both sides and see if it can apply across the board. It's a good point.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the group? Okay, so I have one more. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and you tell me, if you've experienced this and how you would help. So with a client, financial institution has decided that they're going to review all client communications. They know that they have bad documents out there. So in the level of the conversation, simple question what I asked was, what is your inventory of how many different communications documents do you have? She goes, well, we don't know. I haven't been in this job very long. So I said, well, how long have you been in this position? He goes, 6 months. And they're still trying to identify what their universe is of bad documents. So then the next question was, and they're looking at not changing design, just the language and the wording within their documents. They've decided it's going to be a 3-year project. Where are they going wrong and where are they going wrong? I'm going to start with Mike.
Well, I don't know that they're going wrong other than they haven't started yet. It's going to be a long project. I don't know if you can put a time limit on it like that, because if you're looking at only the wording and the terminology, that's going to take some human beings, which takes some time. And so you've got to put together those resources to be able to do that. You've got to identify even where those communications are, as I was talking about earlier. That's a big job. That's going to take some time. So if someone came to me and gave me that kind of an objective with that kind of deadline, I think I'd try to explain to them that they need to be prepared for the fact that since they don't know what they're getting themselves into yet, they may have to extend that deadline.
Is there a better way to approach it?
Then, well, have they taken a path yet? I didn't hear that.
Their plan is just to review every document and essentially infuse their brand, rewrite it, not including any document composition, and they're looking at all items.
No, I hesitate to answer that question without knowing more about the organization. I think that's a different answer for different people. In some cases, I have worked with people that had such a horrible infrastructure for their customer communications and such old technology that it was made more sense to kind of start over, or start with putting new applications in on a new platform with some new controls, with some new guidelines, then to try and correct everything that they had and then gradually move things over as they could. In other cases, that's not possible. And you have to, a lot of organizations, I've seen insurance companies, matter of fact, I worked with one that didn't even know how many document composition systems they had. So you have to do that kind of research first to find out, gee, what are we working with here before you can really answer that question, I think.
That's a challenging question. I think we've all been faced with this scenario, especially more when I was when we are working with our internal clients. You get the call and say, give me a copy of everything I print. And we say, okay. Or have you printed everything? So, well, we've printed what you sent us. And oftentimes they're not really even aware of what they've sent us. So we're deal a lot with, and someone mentioned legacy issues. So we know what we compose. We know what the data is being given to us. Where we struggle with it is on the legacy systems. that come to us pre-composed. And so we've just begun the initiative to take that document and bring it into the, I think it's the back office, and recompose it so that we go from the thousands of templates that are out there, and probably 80%, 90% of them are no longer valid, but they're just out there because instead of altering a template, you just build another one and another one and another one and another one. That's pretty far upstream from us. So we're trying to get more to the point of taking whatever they send us, recompose it so we can control the document better, then we can have better inventory of it. But that's a challenging question from in an area that, at least the way we're set up right now, we don't have a whole lot of control over the upstream areas, other than saying it's really severely broken, and we'd rather you come into our platform and let us control the versions, let us control the templates, let us control the whole aspect of it. So when you ask these questions, we could understand the businesses. But right now, there's so many legacy systems out there that the businesses don't know what they have out there, if that makes any sense at all.
So when you go through that process, how do you overcome the issue of, first of all, the approval from the business owner to get his approval of the change? Because you obviously want to, in a sense, you're going to try to make it look like it was, maybe that might be one of the goals. And then how do you deal with the fact that you also have to put business rules in there too along with that? So is that create additional overhead in terms of trying to take us through that kind of process?
It does initially when you go. I mean, all that's really taken through in the testing phase. We tried the approach of dealing with legacy, of going up and having them change their systems. It's not a priority for them, and it really doesn't matter. So we said, forget it. All we want you to do, send us what you're sending us. We'll do what we have to do on our end, because ultimately we're the ones responsible to make sure that the documents go out correctly. So it's easier for us, more expensive, but easier for us to fix it on our end of it, and then have them just verify that what you think you're sending out. Here's what we're going to send out. Now, are you okay with that?
Also forces them to find document owners for every type of document they have.
Yeah, and oftentimes those people, those document owners are long gone.
Yeah.
And
So you get new ones.
yep.
So I can't answer whether they're doing it right or wrong, because that's only for them to answer, because they know what their target was. So my first question to them was, what's your goal? All right. If your goal is to eliminate paper, if your goal is to make sure that you're in legal compliance, that's two very different things, right? I mean, they're looking at verbiage and legalese and things like that. That speaks to a completely different goal than how do I eliminate paper or how do I eliminate mailing. So I want to make sure I understand what the goal is, first of all. Now, we have clients who have gone through the process of what they call client consolidation, okay? Client communication consolidation, CCC, all right? And so what they do is that, and this is a mega financial firm, they went on a 2-year project. They assigned a project manager, they funded it, the whole 9 yards, and the whole objective was to properly brand everything in one way, properly get everything down, and then eliminate the stuff that wasn't needed. They were producing letters that no business owner was still there. They had no idea what the letter really said, and no one had the internal fortitude to say, we don't need to send that out anymore, okay? So my questions were going to be, what's your goal? Are you committed? Have you reserved the people, the resources, the time, and the money to get this done? Because it takes all of that. Now, they did all of that, and they went from 3,400 letter types, this was just letters, 3,400 letter types down to under 100, okay? Now, it took them 2 years. And by the way, the thing about it now with them, everything that goes out has the same logo in the same place, all right? And it looks and is branded the same. Their goal was branding. They were sick and tired of this logo being over here and this logo having this tagline under it and this logo over here. They were all over the place. So they were after a branding exercise, okay? So that was huge for them. So there's Yeah. Well, there's that too. But really, it's my question would have gone back. What is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? If you're worried about a regulatory thing, and that's why you've got people looking at legalese, that's completely different. That you got to go hire a different group of people to fix that problem. If you're worried about the fact that you have 3,400 plus letters and you don't even know what they are, that's a different activity. But that was a 2-year exercise that was funded. And it was a significant effort, and it required work on their side as much as ours. Now, we helped them by creating a template letter tool that they could reuse over and over again, and had versioning and revision control and authorization control and all that good stuff. But we had to, first of all, figure out what the breadth of the project was. 3,400. It took them a while just to figure out the 3,400, right? But once they figured it out, everyone that very quickly built the cost case to go fund it and get it done, right? So,
Then what kind of ongoing maintenance? So you got down
yeah, that's hard.
from the 34 down to the 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, and pretty soon in a couple of years you're back up. So how do you maintain?
I've seen it work both ways. So I've had a different scenario, but similar thought pattern. I've had another financial firm say, I have 1,200 versions of envelopes. That's stupid. So let's bring it down to a certain reasonable amount. They brought it down to around 200. Okay. And then in 4 years, it was back up to the 5,000 again, because to your point, it wasn't maintained. Right. Now, in this particular customer that I was talking to you a minute ago, who did the CCC, they actually kept that project manager on as a full-time associate, and all future letters have to go through her and her team to be approved. All right. So what that does is that she says, that letter looks, smells, and acts like this letter. I know how it's going to work. I understand that your business need. We're going to make it happen and go this way. So that was a long-term funding situation that they had to figure out. But they saw the kind of the light at the end of the tunnel that says, if we don't put this in place, it's going to be right back there, because every business owner's got their own reason for a letter. And it's just going to go crazy. Forget the regulations. That's a whole nother reason for letters. But yeah, you've got it's a commitment. It really is.
Any other questions?